This is CNN Breaking News.
Tonight, we're getting powerful new reaction to the bombing of that children's hospital in southern Ukraine. President Zelensky claiming just a little while ago that the attack is proof, his word, proof, that genocide is happening in Ukraine. And he's doubling down on his accusation that Russia is committing war crimes. CNN senior international correspondent Sam Kiley is in the region for us. Sam, even after everything we've seen so far in this brutal war, this bombing certainly stands out as especially ruthless.
Yes, Wolf, a new low, but not an unpredictable low if we look at the profligate disregard for civilian life that the Russians have shown so far. And if we look at the record of Vladimir Putin, of course, particularly in Syria, where there was deliberate targeting of hospitals by Russian aircraft throughout his support there of President Assad. So he's got form for this sort of attack, but even by his standards, it's a new low. This is what it looked like.
We're really stretched. Whatever cars you have, send them here. He says airstrike, maternity hospital. This was Russia's response to a global appeal for a ceasefire to evacuate a city of 1 million people. A bomb dropped next to a maternity hospital in Mariupol. It's hospital number 3. Inside, a frantic search for survivors. Early reports say that there were more than a dozen injured. A miraculous outcome to an attempt to a mass killing at a place where lives should begin. Many women and children had already fled to underground bunkers after a week of Russian bombardment. Ukraine's president renewed his pleas for NATO to drive Russia from his nation's skies after the hospital airstrike.
Everything that the occupiers do with Mariupol is already beyond atrocity. Europeans, Ukrainians, citizens of Mariupol, today, we must be united in condemning this war crime of Russia.
Evacuations from other towns have been more successful, but still very limited. Around 700 people, mostly women and children, were bussed out of Energoda, the site of Europe's biggest nuclear reactor, which was captured recently by Russia.
The shops are empty. There's nothing there. Not enough medical supplies. We're tired. We need to eat and rest.
It may seem extraordinary, but these are the lucky ones. They've escaped from the shadow of a nuclear power station and the clutches of Russian troops. But in comparison to what people are enduring in Mariupol, this is good fortune. Yulia Karyulan volunteers at a refugee centre in Zaporizhia set up to receive people fleeing her hometown of Mariupol. It's empty. She's been waiting a week for news from home of her husband Evgeny and daughter Yasia. This morning, she got a brief call. How's your daughter doing?
My daughter told me she loves me.
Of course she does.
Actually, how she's alive. She's doing like all other children doing now in Mariupol. Almost no food, no drinking water, no electricity. It was -5 this night. They have no heating. They're just sitting in a cold basement in some cots.
Her small family is living in a bomb shelter with hundreds of others. She says they can only survive another few days. Then they will have to surface, perhaps to face more of this.
Now, Wolf, of course, the term genocide is much overused. It's a sign, really, of the rhetorical passion that the Ukrainian president feels, because he feels so abandoned by the international community over what he says is their failure to impose a no-fly zone to prevent these sorts of continued atrocities and war crimes being committed, Wolf. But, of course, NATO's fear, very clearly stated, is that if they get involved, that could lead to something far more catastrophic. Wolf?
Sam Kiley on the scene for us. Sam, thank you for that report. Stay safe over there, please. Let's go to the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv right now, where air raid sirens sounded just a short while ago. Our chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward, is there for us. Clarissa, you've been reporting on the devastating toll facing Ukrainians after the strike on the hospital. Is there any doubt that Putin is actually targeting civilians?
Well, Wolf, I think it's always really difficult to differentiate between actively targeting civilians and having a complete disregard for the lives of civilians. But certainly, when you look at some of the places that have been hit in the bombardment over the last week, particularly evacuation routes where civilians were trying to flee to safety, apartment buildings, residential buildings where people were just living with their families. And what's very interesting and very telling and crucially important about this Mariupol maternity hospital is that several hours before this attack took place, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, warned that, in her words, Ukrainian forces were using the hospital complex as a sort of launch pad for military activity. And she claimed at that moment that all staff and patients had been evacuated from that hospital in order to facilitate that military activity. Well, when you look at these images, Wolf, you can see very clearly that there are staff members, that there are patients, that there are children, that there are heavily pregnant women, women who have just given birth, who are bloodied and injured and cut up and having their wounds assisted. So it appears in this case that the Russians understood that this was a hospital. And it becomes very difficult to believe that they actually really genuinely thought that there were no patients and no staff inside that complex being treated. Ultimately, as the mayor of Mariupol said, these are crimes that will have to go to The Hague, potentially to the International Criminal Court to decide. But as Sam pointed out as well in his reporting, we have seen this before, in Syria particularly, where we know concretely that Russian forces were actively targeting hospitals, Wolf.
You know, Clarissa, Mariupol, the city where this attack took place, was supposed to be under a ceasefire so that civilians could actually escape. Are any of these 5 so-called humanitarian corridors actually really safe?
Really safe is a difficult term to sort of categorize exactly, Wolf. I will say that here in Kyiv today, in the suburbs, which have been so hard hit, roughly 3,000 people, according to Ukrainian authorities and local officials here in Kyiv, were able to get out of some of those hardest hit areas. And there were reports that the bombardment in those areas was a little bit less than it had been before. We also heard that quite a few people were able to escape the northern city of Sumy. Again, that has been the site of just some truly horrific bombardment. But if you look at the sort of broader picture, and you look at Mariupol in particular, where for 3 straight days now they have tried desperately to get these people out, to get humanitarian aid in, the shelling continues, the bombing continues, and I don't think anyone can call it a true ceasefire, Wolf.
Yeah, there's no end in sight, at least right now. Clarissa Ward, be careful over there as well. Clarissa's in Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital. On the heels of this awful, horrendous hospital bombing, the United States fears Russia may be planning, get this, another kind of horrific attack with chemical or biological weapons. Let's go to our chief White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins. She's following this breaking story for us. Caitlin, so what are you hearing from the White House?
Yeah, Wolf, it's a blunt warning coming from the White House tonight, saying that people should be prepared for Russia to potentially use a chemical or biological weapons attack in Ukraine or create a false flag operation using them. Now, this warning is coming from the Press Secretary Jen Psaki in a thread tonight on Twitter, and we should give some context here because this comes after several Russian officials have accused the United States in recent days of creating biological weapons in Ukraine. The White House says tonight this is false. They say this is a conspiracy theory that is being echoed by Chinese officials as well. And we know that this comes after just yesterday, a top State Department official testified saying that this is the trick in Vladimir Putin's book, that he often accuses countries or people of doing the very attack that he himself is planning on doing. And that is why you're seeing this response from Jen Psaki tonight, from the White House tonight, warning that this is something that Russia Russia could be prepared to be doing. They note that this is something that Russia has done in the past. They talk about the poisoning of Alexei Navalny. They say Russia has a long and well-documented track record of using chemical weapons in attempted assassinations, and they do fear that they may be well preparing to do that tonight. And Wolf, you'll remember just a few weeks ago, before Russia had actually invaded, we heard from Secretary of State Blinken warning that they could use a fake or real chemical weapons attack as a pretext for invasion. But now, of course, that invasion is underway, and it appears that the White House is concerned once again that this is something that Putin could be preparing to do. One other thing we should note, Wolf, this comes on the heels of a request from Ukrainian President Zelensky to provide Ukraine with more airplanes. He says that they need more aircraft if the U.S. and NATO are not going to create that no-fly zone over Ukraine. Tonight, the Pentagon is flatly rejecting a proposal by the Polish officials, by the Polish Foreign Ministry, to provide Ukraine with those planes. Wolf.
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. Caitlin Collins reporting from the White House. Let's discuss what's going on. Joining us now, the mayor of the southern Ukrainian city of Mykolaiv, Alexander Senkovich. Mayor Senkovich, thank you so much for joining us. Do you share the White House's concern that Putin could potentially actually use chemical or biological weapons against the Ukrainian people?
I won't be surprised in that case. Actually, our city was bombed for 3 last days with the cluster bombs, which are actually illegal. So, and the aim of these bombs is human. Humanity, not the machines or something like buildings, but everything that is alive. So they use cluster bombs to kill our people. I won't be surprised if they use chemical and etc.
We're seeing some truly horrific images, Mayor, of a children's and maternity hospital in Mariupol bombed today. What is the situation on the ground in your city of Mykolaiv?
Our city is almost circled by troops of Russian invaders. So they come from Crimea through the Kherson Oblast from eastern south direction, and they close us in the ring from the northeast. So they bombed us. They made heavy bombardment last 3 days. For example, today they shot the shelter for elderly. And lucky no one died today. And we have ruined about 140 buildings, different buildings in rural area and in the flat buildings. But they don't come too close to us, so our artillery can get them. So they keep staying on about 20-25 miles from the city and bombing from that side.
How are your people in Mykolaiv, in your city, holding up during this truly terrifying assault?
I would say people are really motivated, and they don't fight with with civilians. They fight with Russian invaders, and they are really ready to put their lives to defend their motherland, their children, their women, their parents. So they're really motivated. We arm them. The only problem that we have a territorial defense troops that we gathered from the civil people, and that they don't have too much personal of defense, like helmets and bulletproof vests, which we are trying to find and deliver to Ukraine from Poland and other countries. And for sure, they are really ready to fight till the last ammo.
Mayor Senkovich, good luck to you. Good luck to everyone, all the people in Ukraine. We will stay in touch. Thank you so much for joining us. Just ahead, we'll have more on the threat of Russian chemical or biological attacks in Ukraine. Stay with us.